Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about trend following and a concept about trailing stops that I want to talk to you guys about. Primarily about letting those real big winners run and how to actually capture some of those really nice winners without cutting them out too short. So stay tuned, let's get into it right now. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. If you don't know me, my name is Nick. I talk all about trading, investing, and I try and keep it real, try and keep it down to earth because there's a lot of stuff out there, a lot of hype in the industry of Forex, stocks, all of that stuff. So I try and keep it as real as I possibly can. And today I've got a really interesting concept, or at least I think it's interesting, about trend following. Because I had some people talking to me in the A1 trading community. We were chatting a little bit about trend following. We were talking about letting winners run, trailing stops, whether you should use trailing stops, and that sort of thing. Now, for starters, I want to say that there is no strategy that is going to be perfect for everyone, and some people will like to use things like trailing stops and other people will not. I personally have a strategy where I do use them. I like to use them a lot because I think that they give you some really cool opportunities. Now, the first thing I want to say is that most trades are going to end somewhere here along the spectrum. This is being break even, this is being a really positive trade, and this being a really negative trade. The cool thing about true trend following or letting your winners run with a trailing stop, right? You're just trailing your trade and letting it trend as much as you can, is when you catch a strong breakout, sometimes you catch a very rare instance of an incredibly positive or bullish or bearish market that you catch some really big winners. And I'm going to talk about how I like to do that, how I like to try and capture those moves. So stay tuned in this video. We'll get to that point some point here along the way. But most trades, when it comes to trend following, or trail in with a stop loss, most of them are going to end up somewhere in here, where basically you have a big area where you don't really take huge losses because you have a stop on your trade, right? You keep those losses relatively controlled, but you take a lot of small losers and you take a lot of small winners. And I'm gonna show you guys that visually, so stay tuned. But the cool thing is that every once in a while when it comes to a trend follower, their real winners are few and far between. There's not a lot of big winners when it comes to, but every once in a while you get a really big trade that cashes in big. And I'm gonna show you how you can do that with trailing stops, assuming that you have everything else in your trading plan set up, risk management, proper technical setups, that sort of thing. So stay tuned, let's go ahead and get into that. So what we've got here is, again, a lot of the times when we're talking about trend following, we're talking about putting a stop in your trade and letting it run, we end up getting these small losses or these small winners, and they don't really do much, or maybe even they break even on the account. But every once in a while, we are looking for these trades, the trades that go crazy in one direction, and we are holding on to them until they end. Let me give you some examples of that. So here, what you can see is that let's say we're trading breakouts, right? Sometimes what's gonna happen is you're gonna take a breakout trade and it's just not really gonna go very far at all. So let's say that you decide, okay, I wanna be on dollar Canadian if we break above this key level of resistance, okay? Seems like a pretty simple concept. So you say, hey, let's be as unbiased as we can when setting this up because we already know what's gonna happen. But so yeah, let's say that you're on a key break of this resistance, right? On the break, you may be looking for a buy trade on the break of this resistance. So if you were to take this trade, if you were to take the buy on that level, you may run into some profit, but then you may get stopped out on the retest, right? Let's say that that's what happened. This would be considered what? A small loss, right? A small loss trade is going to happen every once in a while. Actually, it's going to happen a lot of times if you're trading trend following. It just happens, right? Sometimes you get a break. It looks like a false breakout. Technically, yeah, you could have waited for the retest, but that's hindsight speaking, right? We don't know exactly what's going to happen. Let's say that you were just trying to catch the break and you bought into this market as it goes up and you take a small loss. Again, most of your trades when you're trading with the trend, a lot of times they are going to end up just being small losses stacked on top of each other. But I want to show you really the example of what we were talking about when we go back to our graph that we were talking about with the whole, most of your trades are small losses, some of them are small wins, and a very few of them are big wins, okay? This being the big win side, this being the loss side, right? And back to our break even. So to get these, what are we actually looking for? Well, we don't know which trades are going to do incredibly well if we're using a trailing stop, because when we're using a trailing stop, we're taking some of the prediction out of our trade, meaning if we take a buy on the break of this level here, right? Let's say we take a buy on the break of this previous resistance and we get long, what ends up happening is this trade actually keeps going, and if we had taken a target off, we might have taken profits right here, let's say, and that would have been a great trade, don't get me wrong, but we actually could have caught even more simply trailing a stop in using something like a 20 period moving average. We put it on the chart here. You can see, there we go. Trailing in that stop with a 20 period moving average, in this case, would have given us one of those really big wins that we talked about. So in this case, you can see, let's say that we take the trade here, right, or along the break of this move here, and then we put in our trailing stop just underneath structure. So if we were to take a buy here, right, and we put the stop, let's say, under structure right around here, and then we just let this trade run, and we trail that stop in with a 20 period moving average, what ends up happening is price comes up there. Sure, we don't catch the full move, but eventually we get stopped out right around here, which gives us an ending result, right, from taking the trade right here until about here where we got stopped out, gives us something like a 3.8 times our initial risk, right? You can see it right here, 3.8 to 1. And that's kind of cool because what it shows us is that with these big winners, they can actually cash in really, really big on the occasional really nice runner. And that's the thing. Most of the time, what do we know about markets? They don't trend all the time, right? So most of the time, they're actually range bound, they're back and forth. They're not doing a whole lot. But every once in a while, we get something that just really trends in a direction. And if we're able to capture some of that just by trading proper breaks, trading good setups on the technical side, and letting them run, every once in a while we're going to have a trade that comes along and cashes in really, really big. And that's what I love about trading with the trend and letting those trend trades run, is every once in a while you get those legendary trades that people talk about and how awesome they are. So we can actually look for some other examples. Take a look here. Let's say, for example, that you had gotten long on this move. Right? Look at this move here where we broke above key resistance right around here, and the trend just went nuts, right? We broke above here and we just kept trending and trending and trending, haven't hit the 200 period, and we hit all the way back here, all the way over here. We finally close out of that trade for a big winner, just letting that trend really, really play out. That's the cool thing about trading the trend with trailing stops, is we're just letting that trade go for as long as it wants to go. Because a lot of times our intuition gets in the way. We say, well, we need to have, let's say, a target on this trade. We'll do this. And in this case, sure, this would have been a great trade. It would have been a 2 to 1. That's a solid trade. But the trade had a lot more to go had we let it do its thing. And in this case, you can actually see it kind of playing out. The trade runs, it runs, it runs, and it finally closes out here, in this case, instead for even way more. So 3.5 to 1 risk to reward, which looks pretty good. All right, so that's kind of the pros of using a trailing stop, the ones that I really like. The cons of using a trailing stop, though, are also there. When you use a trailing stop, sometimes you cut out a trade too soon, right? Sometimes a normal retest like this one, here I'll give you another example. Let's say that you had gotten short on the break here, and you say, okay, well, I'm short here, and we're gonna trail using the 20 period moving average again. Well, in this case, it actually closed out here when the trend had much more to give. So you have to be careful. Sometimes this is going to happen. Sometimes this is just no fun. I mean, this would have been a winning trade regardless, but the trade had much more to give. So sometimes you have to ask yourself, is this retest a proper retest, or is it actually reversing, right? Because in this case, we tagged that 20 period and held it as resistance multiple times until we finally actually reversed and started going the other direction. But again, the coolest thing about trend following to me is that the risk is relatively defined, while as the upside is undefined. So what that means is that most of our trades, again, just going to close out with a small loss or a small win or break even. But every once in a while, these trades here are going to be the big winners. Now, don't get me wrong, no strategy is going to have no drawdown. It's not going to be perfect, because there are plenty of times where you just keep getting stopped out trying to catch trends, because sometimes the market doesn't trend, and that can be a really tough time to try and catch those big movers if things are just going back and forth. We'll get an example of that going like right here, right? Where basically we don't have any clear trend direction for some time, and you might have been stopped out a bunch of times trying to catch some of the moves, and that would have resulted in your account looking something like this, right? Where you take lots of losses in a row. That's no fun, but it's part of the process. And when it comes to trend following, it's about catching that one big one that cashes in big and brings in quite a bit of balance added to your portfolio. That is the key secret, if you want to call it that, to trading trends, in my view, is to let those, every once in a while, golden trends, the big winners that give you something like 5R, 6R, 7R, to really let them play out. That's where the biggest edge, in my view, to letting those winners run really is really not capping the upside, but capping the downside. So again, putting stops on our trade, looking for that, when I'm talking about trend following, putting stops on the trade there, letting it stop us out if things aren't going our way. And then on the flip side of that, letting the trade run as long as it wants to run, or giving it as much room as we possibly can to catch big wins like the one we see here and some of the other examples we talked about in this video. So thanks so much for watching, guys. I hope this was helpful to you. Do me a favor before you go, leave the video a like. I know YouTubers always ask for it, but it is helpful to sharing this content with more people who enjoy it, and lets YouTube know that you want to see more content like this. So thanks so much, and we'll see you back in the next video.